Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Profit Podcast. Today we are talking injuries, one of the most important things in fantasy football, because no football season happens without injuries. And your star players in round one, they'll get injured. Your players in round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there will be injuries to every position, every round of your draft. So you need to know who's injury prone, who do you need to avoid, and I don't know the answer to that. So I brought on someone who does, Dr. Nithin Natwa. Did I get that right?
Natwa, but it's a
Natwa,
good
Dr.
attempt.
Nithin Natwa from Fantasy Docs. You'll know him from his Instagram page with over 3,000 followers. He's here to talk injuries. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Calvin. It's good to talk with you over Zoom. You've been
Yeah.
we've been talking since I think both of us started up our accounts around the same time. So it's been nice seeing both of our followers grow and people appreciate the content that we're putting out.
Yeah, you definitely fill a niche that, there aren't a lot of pages doing medical analysis that at least is good for fantasy football.
Yeah, I think sports medicine itself is a relatively newer field, and I think people are just kind of realizing the different ways that it can help the general population. I saw this guy David Chow, who's a sports orthopedic surgeon on Twitter, and he was making some pretty accurate predictions on injury
Mhm.
recoveries, injury timelines, and it seemed like something I could do as well too with my background training. And I noticed that there really wasn't too many people doing it on Instagram, so I tried to fill that niche.
Yeah, it's a great page. Can you explain your training to people who may not be familiar with the page? If you're not familiar, make sure you go check it out. It's one of the best fantasy pages. I mean, you got every prediction right last year. So, but can you explain your background, who exactly
Yeah,
you are?
definitely. Thank you so much for that, by the way. So I'm a fellowship trained sports medicine physician. I did my fellowship training and served as a team physician at Michigan State University. And I did my primary care training at Western Michigan University, where I served as a team physician for the Broncos as well, too. I did my primary care training at a trauma one hospital. So I've had a lot of experience in medicine. And then I've also translated that to providing medical care for Division One Power Five athletes as well as professional athletes. And my focus is more so clearly on football. And I enjoy just providing assessments on injuries that I've seen throughout my training that pop up in the NFL.
So, I think it's safe to say you're probably the most educated fantasy football analyst, at least on Instagram.
Well, at least for medicine, I will try and claim that title. But there are some really good accounts out there, yours included, that do a lot of great statistic analysis and a lot of great history analysis on the actual playing profiles. And I try and do that as well too. But I would definitely not claim to be the best in that regard, although I'm trying to be.
Now it's your page. It doesn't seem like someone who's a doctor who then is trying to analyze players, and it doesn't seem like someone who plays fantasy football and knows a little medical stuff. It seems like a genuine fantasy football fanatic who also is an expert in medical field. Did you play fantasy football long before you became an
Yeah.
expert in the medical field? So how long have you been playing?
So I've been playing since probably around 2008, 2009.
Okay,
So about 10, 11 years now.
okay,
Seems wow, it's a long time now. but
yeah.
but yeah, no, me and my college friends, we get pretty into it. We have a belt. There's a lot of trash talking that goes on, and yeah.
Well, that's
What?
great. I'm sure in your 11 years, you've noticed injuries definitely have a huge impact on the fantasy season. I mean, last year, David Johnson was drafted in the first round in many leagues, and he's gone. He's done
Yeah,
after week 5. And it's every single year, there are players that you draft in your first round, and they're gone. And it's hard to know who to avoid. So I see on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube on every podcast, the label injury prone gets thrown
yeah.
around. So many players get labeled injury prone. And I started thinking, are they injury prone or do they just have bad luck? Because like there has to be a difference, right, between injury prone and just getting injured a few times.
Yeah, most
So
definitely.
yeah, so can you explain what injury prone is and what the difference between a player getting hurt repeatedly or having bad luck is between that and being injury prone?
Yeah. So injury prone is definitely something that exists. I agree. It's way overused, and there's a couple of factors that I think go into that. And when someone is injury prone, it's not necessarily true that they're always going to be injury prone. Some people can be just injury prone for a short period of time following a specific type of injury. And that's really what plays a huge part in injury prone is what kind of injury that they suffered, because some of those, they linger, they get re-aggravated really easily in the short period of time, and some of them get re-aggravated throughout the rest of the person's life. Other ones, it kind of depends on if it's a head injury or if they're at risk for having a lot of lingering symptoms. And then the last kind of discounts everything I just said. And at a certain point in time, it doesn't matter what kind of injury it is or how many of that specific type of injury the player had. If they just keep on having these random injuries that are unrelated, that also gets the injury prone label. And I like to think of that as if they're having an injury that has if they have a repeat injury over 2 seasons, or if they're having symptoms that carry over for longer than 2 seasons as well too. I guess a good example, that's the ACL. A lot of players tear their ACL and then they tend to have a repeat injury the next year. And that's fair because they're injury prone for that next year. They're in the process of rehabilitating a very serious injury. Their hamstrings aren't really well conditioned. Their quads aren't really well conditioned. And sometimes they suffer a very severe strain and they get knocked out for the next season. And then someone's like, oh, they're done. They're injury prone. They're labeled for the rest of their career. But really, they're only injury prone that next season. And the following season, as we saw with someone like Dalvan Cook, they come back really strong and possibly win even some leagues for some people.
Now, I also hear people, since everyone gets injured, a lot of people kind of seem to make up stuff about injuries. And there's some rumors going around about like the ACL tear. I heard someone say it's good he tore his ACL in college because that means it grew back stronger. Is that a thing?
That's absolutely not true. That is absolutely not true.
Because I heard that it was from like an actual person who was very good at fantasy football, very knowledgeable, and they said that, and I was just like, wait.
Yeah. So I mean,
that's not a thing.
That misconception might come from the fact that when you fracture a bone, bones do tend to heal back stronger. That is not true about an ACL. And the rationale behind that is that a bone has a very good blood supply. So with a great blood supply, the bone turnover, the bone reformation is very strong, and it tends to layer down at sometimes a more dense rate than it was before, hence the stronger bone. Tendons and ligaments have very poor blood supply, and actually they don't heal back really at all. They need to be surgically screwed back into place and pinned back into place via surgery, which, as a disclaimer, I'm not a sports surgeon. That's a different field. I am a non-operative sports physician who deals with spinal and extremity injections, as well as fracture management that doesn't include cutting someone open.
All right. So it is not true, everyone. If they tear their ACL, it does not grow back stronger. Can you give us an example, like a textbook example of injury prone, either playing right now or in the past couple of years, just someone who you hear their name and you go, staying away, they're 100% injury prone?
Yeah, definitely. I can even break it down by position. So with position-wise, for a running back, I'd say Devontae Freeman. And the reasoning behind that is because of his sports hernia injury. It's something that tends to get easily re-aggravated, especially with a lot of cutting, juking movements. And that's exactly the type of runner that Devontae Freeman is. Also, age-wise, it's not a good prognostic factor when the player's over 24. And that's something that gets really, really flared up. And I'm actually going to go disconnect my phone in 1 second as well, too, because I think it keeps on ringing. For tight ends, Tyler Eifert, Jordan Reed, Evan Ingram, all three of those, classic injury prone. All of them for concussions, but in Evan Ingram's case as well, too, he also had a Lisfranc injury, which is a fracture to the middle of that foot. And it's a very unstable joint. And when it heals back not quite as stable, and it's really easy to re-aggravate that. And it usually has some chronic pain. And if you can imagine having chronic pain in the middle of your foot when you're supposed to be running down a football field, it's not going to bode well. Wide receivers wise, we actually collaborated on this guy last year. AJ Green has reached that injury prone designation, unfortunately. And it was last season that made me throw in the towel on that.
I forgot AJ Green existed. How long has it been since that man played? It's been 2 years, I think.
Sammy Watkins, Will Fuller as well, too, although I will say I'm higher on Will Fuller just because of his situation.
Mm-hmm.
So he's one of those rare cases where I throw that injury prone high risk designation, but also say that, where he's being drafted is a decent ADP for him and he's got great upside. And
Yeah.
that's kind of my breakdown with running backs, tight ends, wide receivers. I'll throw Sony Michel and James Conner in that running back group as well too.
All righty. So those guys, they're all textbook injury prone, and you're
Yeah.
avoiding them all except for Fuller.
Yeah, I am okay with Fuller. And all these guys, there is honestly a level where they're worth taking a shot at. Most of them. Like Tyler Eifert, I'm definitely not. I'm just not going to do it. But
Yeah.
but a lot of these other guys, there's a level that I'll pursue them. Sammy Watkins is another absolute no on my part, just because.
Just no,
And
not happening.
that game, I know there's a lot of people last year that got conned by that first game, that 3-touchdown, 200-yard game, which I think matched his output for the rest of the season, possibly.
I think it was a little bit more. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're avoiding them. Now, Will Fuller, it's interesting because I think every fantasy football player actually knows he is injury prone. But there's a point in like the 9th, 10th, 11th round where you say, I don't care. He's going to give me 3 really good weeks. And that can't be said for the other one. When he's on the field, he's special. It's just unfortunate, the injury prone. Now what injury or yeah. So what is an example of bad injury luck? Someone who's been injured a few times and some people may think is injury prone, but he's not injury prone. He's just, had bad luck.
So, I mean, I got to put my boy Dalvin Cook out there. I got a ton of hate on this last year for supporting him, and I think you actually had him pretty high as well, too, last season.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people were giving him a lot of flack because, he tore his ACL, and then he had a miserable season the next season because he tried to rush back from that ACL, pulled a hamstring multiple times, missed the majority of the season. And people are just like, he's dusted. He's injury prone. He's not going to come back. But 2 years out of that ACL, that's that prime recovery period, as long as you take into account the prior talent that player had and their age. And Dalvin Cook is a young player, and he was one of the best, if not the best running back coming out of college his year. And then he shocked the world. He came out swinging, and he finished the fantasy season regardless. He didn't finish. He finished the regular season. And if you had Dalvin Cook, he was the number one reason why you were in the fantasy playoffs and likely had at least a first round bye. Now, he did suffer an injury, and he knocked, I think he came down really hard on that shoulder and separated that shoulder with an AC joint sprain. And there's different degrees of separations there, and usually they tend to knock a player out for a game or two. It's not uncommon, and there's really it's a ton of pain. I've had one too while snowboarding, and I'm no NFL player, but I thought it was pretty painful. And most cases these players, they sit out a game or two. Now there is one exception to that, Josh Jacobs, but he's superhuman apparently because he was playing through a fractured separated shoulder. And there are certain players like that, but that's not the norm.
That's
but
not
if you
the
think
norm.
about it, Dalvin Cook, he was in a great situation and he had a solid handcuff. And that's like lightning striking twice, was the fact that he separated his shoulder right in the playoffs in that second game, and his backup got knocked out immediately after that. Some people are going to cry and just say that, he's injury prone, but that's unlucky. That's just not lucky.
If you grabbed Mike Boone, things worked out for you.
Yeah. Did Boone do okay? I thought Boone didn't even throw up too many stats.
He was awful the first week he played. He started 1 week and he was awful, like 3 points. And then the last week of the Super Bowl, he put up a monster game, if I remember. And I played the Dalvin Cook owner. I played the Dalvin Cook owner in the Super Bowl. He did not have Dalvin Cook, but he had handcuffed with Madison. Both of them were gone, and I played Mike Boone, and I beat him.
Oh, my God. That guy was probably so upset.
Well, that's why it's important to understand the injury. So now that we're heading into draft season, we're mid-July, which, the fantasy football, it starts turning, mid-July, August. That's really when people start their drafts. There are a lot of players, like I said, people are either avoiding or targeting based on injury history. I want to go through, we've got a couple written down. I want to hear injury prone, yes or no. If you want to elaborate, go for it, but you don't have to. So number 1 on this list is Leonard Fournette. He was very requested on the TikTok. Leonard Fournette, injury prone, yes or no?
By the way, your TikTok seems to be blowing up, man. Congrats on that. We'll see if it gets banned in the U.S. though, but
Oh no.
hopefully it doesn't. So
Hopefully.
Leonard Fournette, I would say, is not injury prone. He had a neck strain. It's not a big deal. We've all had a neck strain. It was week 17. From what I understand, it wasn't really relevant for playoff implications. It's unfortunate that he chose to sit out, but if it was any other part of the season that was relevant, I feel like he would have played through it. He did have some hamstring strains in previous seasons, which, we've talked about in the past as well too. Hamstring strains within the same season, yes, that makes you injury prone. Hamstring strain one season does not carry over for a risk to the next season unless you've had two hamstring strains in separate seasons. Then we get a little bit more concerned. But I was high on Fournette last season. I was happy that he lived up to my hype because I was about to get crucified on him as well too. But I do believe that Fournette is not injury prone, and I think he's in a great situation where he's really the only viable running back in that offense.
Now, I made a video about Leonard Fournette, how I love him this year because, he's a great running back, and he gets a lot of hate. He's falling to end of second round in some leagues. A lot of
Yeah.
people are really worried that Chris Thompson is going to come in. Is Chris Thompson
from the Redskins, right?
the guy who's always injured?
Yeah.
They
Thompson
don't
is
want
injury prone.
they don't want Leonard Fournette because they think he's injury prone, and they're worried about Chris Thompson, who actually is injury prone. It's funny how fantasy football players, they can hear one person say someone's injury prone, and then they just, for the rest of the next 5 years of that player's career, they just avoid them.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Fournette
so the next one,
doesn't make any sense because Fournette made it through the entire fantasy season,
yeah.
unless you're playing week 17 like those random leagues.
If you're
Fournette
playing
was
week 17,
also,
you deserve to lose Fournette.
and he's the reason why once again, he's another running back who is the reason why most players were in the playoffs. And he was another epic college talent who just got injured a little bit early on. Like, I remember this guy, they were talking about him sitting out his junior season just because he was already guaranteed to be a high first round pick.
Yeah. Now, you've mentioned him already, but we can, yes or no. Dalvin Cook injury prone, yes or no?
No, I will say that he is not injury prone.
You heard that TikTok. Dalvin Cook is not injury prone, coming from a doctor.
Yeah. ACL tear, hamstring strain related to the ACL tear, and an AC joint separation. That is an injury history that could match up with literally 30% of the NFL.
Yeah. All right. Next one, we collabed on him last year, but your thoughts may have changed since then. Melvin Gordon, injury prone, yes or no?
He's tough because he's one of those players I was talking about where it happens over multiple seasons. And they're not really related, but they really hit you at difficult parts. And it hits you later on in the season. He missed 3 out of 4 playoff seasons pretty much prior to last year when he sat out last year and then came back and he wasn't really doing too well.
No, it was just average.
He is in a good situation, and I believe he's going – so in ESPN drafts, he's going at pick 39. He's in Denver. Lindsey, I was never high on Lindsey last season. Freeman is – I saw this meme where it was like this – I don't know if you put – someone
skeleton?
posted it. Yeah. Like someone is just swimming amazingly in the pool, and they have this like 5-year-old like drowning in the pool, and that's supposed to be Lindsey. And then they have a skeleton at the bottom of the ocean, and that's Royce Freeman.
Do you remember Royce Freeman?
Yeah,
he was supposed to be the starter.
I will say that is one of my missed picks, and I'll say that's why I don't claim to be all outright like best of the best in terms of fantasy analysis. I stick to the medical analysis.
Well, everyone was high on Freeman. What was it, 2-3 years ago? Because he was great in college. He came in preseason, had like the 30-yard touchdown run. Everyone drafts him, and then
he crushed it, Oregon.
He was amazing, and he never got a chance. He never got a chance, and now he's third string. Oh goodness! I hope he can get on a new team.
Yeah, Gordon is someone though that you see him later on in that 4th round. You should take him. He's going to be looking to prove himself. He had a terrible season last year. He's younger. He's 27, I think, this year. And he's had a season of rest, to be honest. He didn't do anything last year. So.
Yeah. All right, next one. Probably the most controversial player in fantasy past couple of years because, There's someone called the counselor who advocates taking him first round,
Oh
but he's
wow.
been injured a lot.
I don't know what the counselor says anymore because I don't follow him. But
Well, he still wants this guy in the first round, David Johnson.
David Johnson, wow.
Injury prone? Yes or no?
So David Johnson was someone who I was very high on last year as well too, and it was. I mean, I thought it was validated. He had a hand fracture, and it's a hand fracture that actually shows pretty poor results afterwards. But he was talented enough and young enough to overcome that and come back stronger the following season. Last season, he had a very ill-defined injury. He had a back injury, which back injuries in general just terrible. Like if you're saying that it's something in your back, then it doesn't matter if it's like a real serious thing that's gonna paralyze you or just something that's gonna cause you a little bit of low back pain. If you're over the age of 30, like I am, you know that a little bit of back pain sucks. And and it will definitely hinder your performance. And it's super easy to re-aggravate. And he is we don't know what he had. I couldn't justify taking him at the exact same spot that Melvin Gordon is being drafted at. They're literally at 38 and 39 on ESPN right now. And David Johnson is ranked higher than Melvin Gordon. I would 100% take Gordon over David Johnson this year.
So you worry more about Johnson's injury history?
We know exactly what Melvin Gordon's injuries have been, and we know that he's had an adequate amount of rest. And we also know that Melvin Gordon's injuries aren't that serious. We don't know what David Johnson's injury was. He didn't do well at all last season, whereas Gordon, I believe, came on stronger towards the end of the season when he did come back. I mean, I'm just someone who plays the risks more than just kind of the gut feelings. I'm with if it's an injury that I know typically doesn't respond well, then regardless of kind of what the gut feeling is, I go with the stats. And back injuries in older players, David Johnson's going to turn 29 this year, I believe.
I think so.
He's turning 29 this December. That's ancient for a running back. He's like,
especially one with the workload
ancient.
He's had.
Yeah, that's ancient for a healthy running back, which David Johnson has not been healthy his career. So, I mean, I'm gonna say pass on him based on injury concerns.
All right, next one. There's a common theme. A lot of these are running backs.
Yeah.
I'm wearing his jersey right now. I'm drafting him where he's going. I like the value, but Todd Gurley. I mean, he fell from fantasy grace. He was the number one guy, and then he got
arthritis.
Won
me my league 2 years in a row. He won me my league 3 years ago, and he carried me to my league championship 2 years ago, where I actually ended up winning with like a backup running back.
Yeah, because he got injured.
Yeah, but I cuffed him, which is super important.
Is he injury prone? Yes or no?
He is. Yes, he's injury prone. I was So I was going to say that he definitely is at risk for injury, but not in the same way that you'd expect. So he has arthritis, and I've gone over this ad nauseum. I have a couple posts up on it if anyone wants to read like a page about it. But arthritis is something that doesn't get better over time. There's nothing really to cure arthritis. There's only things to slow it down. And if we're talking Gurley, the way that he works, high volume, downhill runner, crushes it with the carries. Each carry worsens that condition. That means that the later the season gets, the higher the risk it is for him, and the higher chance there is that he's going to have an arthritic flare, which means that his knee gets really painful and swollen, and he needs to rest it to get it to calm down, which means, either missing a game outright or having significantly reduced carries. And right now, he's going at the 27th pick. And also, you were suggesting that some people were saying to take him in the first round.
No, that was David Johnson.
Oh no, that was David Johnson. Sorry, yeah, but yeah, no, the 27th pick. That's like early third round.
His ADP's been climbing then, I guess, because it was a while ago, a month or two ago, it was in the fourth. I think it must be climbing.
Yeah. So I started using, and also this might be a suggestion for other people out there. One of my followers got into pretty heated arguments on my post about using Fantasy Pros and Fantasy Football Calculator, and I guess those sites aren't really as up to date, which I did some research and he was right about it. And a lot of them just use kind of the drafts that are done on their own site, which are obviously a lot less frequent than those that are done on Yahoo, ESPN. So what I started doing is I started checking the ADPs that are actually listed on the live draft trends on ESPN, and those are giving me a lot more up-to-date kind of projections.
All right, I'll check those out. So I don't like him that early. It's unfortunate. Now, one thing you're probably going to laugh at this. I heard this said by another very respected fantasy football podcast, a big one. They said, don't worry about Todd Gurley because it's arthritis. It's not like anything broken. It's just going to be pain, and he can run through the pain. Is this true? Can players run through arthritic knees, or is that gonna,
No,
affect
that's
him?
true. It is true. Arthritis is pain-based, and if they want to run through it, they can run through it. But I would argue that he did not run through it, and we've had
Yeah.
evidence of him not running through it. And he is now 1 year older, if not 2 years, because I mean, it actually happened 2 seasons ago that the real downfall happened in the
Mm-hmm.
playoffs. So, I mean, yes, some players can run through the pain. Todd Gurley has shown not really too much evidence that he wants to do that. He hasn't shown really a commitment to fantasy. He's actually said that he hates fantasy. So you can't expect him to and that's his prerogative. He's worked really hard to get to where he is. If he doesn't care about fantasy, that's whatever. It's up to him. But that's another thing to argue against taking him on the basis that he's gonna run through the pain in a meaningless late season game that's only relevant for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, and that division, if they're out of the playoff hunt, why would he? Like, he could
Yeah,
run through the pain, but why would he? So
yeah,
Todd Gurley
exactly.
staying away from, David Johnson staying away from, Leonard Fournette, he's good. Dalvin Cook, good. Melvin Gordon, pretty good, depending on
And
where.
also, I guess another thing is that Gurley's playing with Matt Ryan. Like Matt Ryan throws the ball. he's no Goff, who's like a game manager. Like Matt Ryan is
Yeah,
trying to win the game by slinging the ball. He's not going to be handing it off just because like the coach tells him to.
yeah. So the next one is probably, out of every player that I've seen labeled injury prone, I've seen this player labeled injury prone the most. And I think he came in that class with Dalvin Cook. Darius Geis.
Oh, guys.
This one's gonna be interesting, I know.
Yeah.
We collabed a little while ago. Darius Geis injury prone? Yes or no?
No, I do not think the Darius guys, and this one, people are gonna like crucify me for it. But I don't think he's injury prone for the same reason that I didn't think Dalvin Cook was injury prone. And Darius Geis had the same. Actually, he had a worse injury course about it because he also had an ACL injury, and I was following it pretty closely actually because it ended up being a complicated ACL injury that got infected. I was actually telling people that you should definitely not draft Darius Geis last season. I was like, there's no way in hell this guy's going to be any good because, first of all, he's 1 year, less than a year removed from an ACL injury. And secondly, that was a super complicated ACL injury that required them to go in and operate again on it. So there was no doubt in my mind that he was not going to be ready last season, and he wasn't. And then he ended up getting reactivated, which is super
Mm-hmm.
common, as we talked about. Had a hamstring strain, was knocked out for most of the season. But this season, he's two seasons out. He's had a much more prolonged off season where he's had a much bigger chance to rest it as well too. The only issue that I have with him is that it seems like the Redskins don't feel that way
Not the
because
Redskins, not the Redskins.
sorry.
The Washington football team. They don't have
Oh
a name.
yeah.
They don't
I
have a
was like,
name
wait, did I
right
miss him
now.
get traded? Yeah. I mean, I hope they go with the Red Tails. That seems like a sick name, but
Red Tails would be good. I
yeah.
like Red Wolves. That's a cool name.
Red Wolves Sioux General sounds pretty awesome.
Honestly, all
Like,
the names are better, I think.
yeah. Yeah, people are really upset about that, and I feel like they should probably think about why they're so upset about it. But no. So yeah, the Washington whatever they're gonna be Washington fourth in the division. Let's call them for right now. But I mean, Scott Turner. Scott Turner is a new offensive coordinator,
Mm-hmm.
and offensive coordinators usually like to put in their own stamp. They try and like set up their own plan, and they usually like to use their own guys. And if they hadn't drafted a running back high, I'd be like, maybe Geis is that guy. But they drafted a running back in the third round. That's a very high place to take a running back. And usually that means that person is going to have a significant part in the play. They drafted J.D. McKissick as well, too, who's a significant, I think, receiving back as well, too.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of things that seem to cloud it. New offense coordinator, drafting a high running back, acquiring another running back, and Geis not really having had a chance to acclimate to the Skins offense. So it's not the injury that concerns me about him. It's the chance that he'll get. Like I'm afraid he's going to get Royce Freeman and just not have the opportunity to really show what he's got. If he gets traded to a good situation, I would 100% be on board with taking
All
him.
right, so you're not worried about the injury; it's just the actual situation that
Yeah.
worries you. So injury-wise, do you think he could be like Dalvin Cook, just like that, where he,
Yeah, if he had the opportunity. Cook is in such a unique situation though. He had literally no competition for touches, and he had an offensive coordinator that was literally vocally saying, "I want to pound the rock. Like I don't
yeah,
want to throw the ball at all."
it's an
So I mean
incredible
that
situation.
yeah, that was kind of a easy call to say, but
So Darius Geis is not injury prone. This wasn't a waste of money. He just is on a horrible team that doesn't want him.
yeah.
All right,
I
I
will
guess
say
that
that
makes it better.
he does have a pretty low ADP, like a very, very
He's
low
going
ADP.
really low.
Like he's in, I think here it's saying 104. So, I mean, when you're taking picks that late, you're pretty much just throwing darts anyways. So, I mean, yeah, take him if you want, but just know that his situation is not great, but
Yeah.
not really an injury concern on my part.
All right, we've got one or two more. This is another running back. Surprise, surprise. James Conner.
James Conner. I'm a disclaimer to all the Steelers fans who are about to hate me. I am a Steelers fan, and my first jersey was actually a Polamalu jersey. And I also have a Bell Steelers jersey. So, I have two Steelers jerseys. That's usually a pretty good indication. But I don't like James Conner. And I'm also a Pitt fan, too, as much as that is. Like, and I loved watching James Conner at Pitt. I mean, the guy beat cancer and then proceeded to crush, like, a bunch of rushing records at
How
Pitt.
can you not like this guy?
Yeah, I like James Conner. I just don't like him on my fantasy team.
All right, you like the person, not the player.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a bunch of reasons behind it. He's one of the players that doesn't stay healthy, and he has a bunch of random injuries that just tend to pile up. He hasn't finished the season yet. His running style it's a running style of a much bigger player, which I mean, I know he had that picture of his back, which was like he's doing a bunch of back days, I guess, but like he's not a bowling ball type of body type, but that is the way that he runs. And he's had MCL injury, he's had an AC joint sprain, he's had a thigh hematoma, and all of these have caused him to miss games. And the thing is that each of those injuries could have been played through. Depending on the type of severity it was, that's not an injury like an ACL where it's like if you tear your ACL, you're not playing for the rest of the season. Each one of those other injuries I mentioned, there is a chance that could have been played through, and none of them were. So that also makes me a little bit concerned about his durability. I'm not a huge fan of him. He's not someone I would reach for.
I'm not reaching. I mean, from a just talent situation perspective, I don't really like him.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna go to there are a couple comments on TikTok that they really wanted to hear about.
Right.
AJ Green was one. AJ Green, injury prone, yes or no?
Yeah, he is now.
All
He
right.
is.
Do you think he's gonna play more or less than 6 games this year?
I think he'll play more. I just don't know how good he's going to be. Like, I mean, he's coming back from a pretty serious injury. Those high ankle sprains, they're not pleasant, and they take a really long recovery from. And he's probably going to have some chronic pain from it. A lot of his catches are pretty spectacular catches where he gets up there, comes down with 1 foot, and then that might aggravate it. Or
he's not
he's on the wrong side of 30 as well, from what I understand.
Yes, he's pretty old. Next one, 2 quarterback, Cam Newton and Matthew Stafford.
So I'm from Detroit, so I am obliged to be a Lions fan, which is what I have been. My family grew up in Pittsburgh, which is why I have that affiliation as well too. But I am a Lions fan first, which is pretty despondent life. And I want Stafford to be healthy, but I'm concerned that he might not be. He's got spondylolysis is what the medical term is for a back stress fracture, which is a condition he had also had prior. And the thing about that is that injury is really aggravated by that torquing motion and that throwing motion when you're kind of going through. And if you're even the most casual NFL fan, you know that Stafford is known as the gunslinger in the NFL because Detroit hasn't had a viable run game since Barry Sanders.
Yeah.
And a lot of people weren't alive when Barry Sanders was playing. So,
Speaking of Barry Sanders and their run game, Garyon Johnson injury prone, yes or no?
yes. Yeah,
Okay, that's just a
yeah.
yes. I don't think that one needs any
There's
elaborate
no
answer.
explanation
Just
for that
yes.
one. I have very high hopes for him too, but yeah, he's injury prone. So
Um,
Stafford, I am worried about him re-aggravating that. I'm not worried about Carson Wentz re-aggravating it, although he has the exact same injury. Based on his progression following that injury, he
all right.
crushed it when he came back. He was chucking the rock, didn't have any kind of issues with it, and just kind of that verified history following the injury and not having aggravation makes me feel pretty confident about him. Cam Newton, I'm pretty concerned about. He had a Lisfranc injury. And if he was a quarterback who was a pocket passer and just threw a bunch of deep bombs, I wouldn't be worried about it at all. But he has made his bread and butter off of being a prolific runner. And a Lisfranc fracture is going to significantly limit his upside on that. Once again, older quarterback, not great timeline for a return on that. It's so we have his age arguing against him, we have the injury arguing against him, and we have the style of play arguing against him. Also in a completely new system. Not a great.
It's a hard system. It's not any.
Yeah.
So you're staying away from Newton. Now, is this about Newton? This is once again something I've heard from very respected fantasy sources. They blame the injury history. They blame the injuries that he's had, not on his play style, but because he went vegan. Does that actually have anything?
I'm not vegan. Some of my good friends are, which I'm not going to make any comments on that. But as long as you get a good protein intake, I'm sure being vegan is fine. And these NFL athletes, they are able to pay buco money on getting their diets tailored, and I'm sure he was getting adequate intake. And I don't think that his diet had anything to do with his injuries. I think it's the fact that he was a large, bull-headed runner who made amazing plays at the sacrifice of his own health. Despite him being laid out there for the one play he didn't jump on the football for, I think people forget that he has put everything out there.
Yeah.
I love Cam as a player.
I do too.
He's awesome, but definitely not someone I want on my fantasy team.
I just find it so funny that people could watch Cam Newton play and blame injuries on his diet and not what he does on the field.
Runs into a 200, 300-pound defensive lineman and just gets
because he didn't eat red meat today. Yeah, so this one is probably going to be tricky to answer. This is probably the most healthy running back. Christian McCaffrey, what is the likelihood of him getting injured? Is there any way to even answer that?
No.
Okay.
I could say that he's got a low likelihood, which I do think he has a low likelihood. I do think it's higher than his previous couple seasons, just because the longer you play in the league, the higher the risk there is of an injury. But there's nothing that makes me think, oh, this is the season that he's definitely going to blow out his knee or something like that.
Okay. So the workload doesn't make you think,
wood, by the way, for anyone.
He's going to go blow out his knee tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right, so that was the speed run, injury prone, yes or no, and then we're going to get a couple more questions, and then I'll let you go. So this is some more specific team questions. Everyone's high on the Buccaneers, both Godwin, Mike Evans, Tom Brady. Everyone is high on this situation. Now, both Godwin and Evans went out last year with fairly serious, I think, injuries, yet people seem to have just completely, based on their ADP at least, forgotten that they got hurt. Are you worried about Godwin and Mike Evans health-wise?
So that's Mike Evans. I definitely am, because Mike Evans has had hamstring strains throughout his entire career. And that's, like I said, that's something that, one or two hamstring strains is not a big deal. But once you have over two hamstring strains, or two hamstring strains that include an entirely ended season, then that gets a little bit concerning. In addition to that, Mike Evans is a deep threat. And, famous Jameis is a great quarterback to throw deep bombs down to Mike Evans, streaking down the field. Tom Brady, although undeniably the GOAT based on his resume, not known for throwing deep bombs. And especially probably not going to make that change at this stage in his career. Yeah, so that would make me a little bit concerned. Yeah. Godwin, he's a slot receiver, I believe. And he did have a really serious hamstring strain last year. It's a hamstring strain that was so severe that he ended up being ruled out for the season like immediately. And if that's happening, that means that so hamstring strains, the term is it makes you think that it's not super severe, and it can be just a little bit of inflammation, but it can also be up to the point where the actual hamstring muscle is torn visibly, and that's kind of usually the level where you start ruling players out for multiple games right away. So he would be someone I would be a little bit wary of. Let me check my handy dandy ADP.
He's going high. He's going high. He's
Where's
going
he?
really high. He's one of the first 5 wide receivers, I think, last I checked off the board. He's going high.
He's going in the top 50 picks. Looks like I would be. So what I would look for, and I haven't seen anything because all these. Wow, he's going borderline first round.
Yeah.
First round if you're in a 14-person league. That's too high for me.
Even if you weren't hurt, that's too high.
Yeah. I'm not touching him at that ADP. Some things you can look out for, which I think it might be something that we might talk about, is so Hunter Henry was someone that I was really high on, despite him being 1 year out from an ACL. And I just said how I don't target players that are 1 year out from an ACL. And the reasoning was because they were giving specific timings of his routes and his cone drills. And they were saying what times that he was doing that was better than his times at the combine. And that made me very confident that he was ahead of schedule. The fact that also he played in a game at the end of the same season that he tore his ACL made me think that he was far ahead of schedule and one of those outliers. So if you start seeing news about Godwin clocking better times, Godwin taking part in stuff he doesn't need to be taking part in, and stuff that shows that he's really being defined as ahead of schedule, then that would be something where you could consider taking him. Still not in the first round. Don't do that. But that would be something where you could definitely, consider picking him up in the second round or something like that.
All right. So if we see that he is, definitely ahead of schedule, but unless that's the
case. And not
case,
just the coach being like, oh, he's 110%.
He's doing well. He's going to play. It's okay. So
I've never seen a coach say something about a recently injured player, be like, oh, he's doing terrible. Yeah, there's no way this guy's gonna be ready.
Guys, don't draft him. Yeah. He's not.
But if you see concrete numbers,
this one's gonna be easy for you to answer, I think. Even if it weren't an injury situation, it's very muddled. Seattle backfield. Are you staying away?
Yeah, I'm staying away.
Chris Carson, Rashad Penny, both injured. That doesn't interest you in a timeshare with Carlos Hyde?
Yeah, didn't they say that Penny is probably even going to start on the PUP list?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know why there's some penny truthers out there. Like the dude was injured in the middle of last season, and he's still starting on the PUP list.
And he
Chris Carson, Chris Carson also fractured his hip, and people think that he's going to be the same person as he was. And he could argue, he could prove me wrong, but it's not the hip I'm worried about. People are going to be like, "Oh, the hip's completely healed," and yes, the hip is probably completely healed. That bone is healed. But that doesn't mean that all the deconditioning that happened with those quadricep muscles, those hamstring muscles, those glute muscles are back up to where they were NFL form. And that does mean that he's still probably going to run at that same speed. And that equals soft tissue injuries. That equals a glute medius strain, a hamstring strain. That equals a quad hematoma. And just the fact that there's a crowded backfield just further muddles that, like you said, too. And the fact that they picked up Carlos Hyde. Why are they signing him if they think that Carson's going to be the guy? I mean, maybe if Penny's on the PUP list, that's who they're backing up. But I mean, I think it's going to be a dogfight there, and I think it's going to end up being a timeshare.
Yeah. Oh, you're forgetting he fumbles all the time.
Oh yeah, I left out that key factor. I mean, they gave him so many. They gave him so many chances, though. No matter how many times he fumbled last year, they just kept on giving him the rock.
It's funny. I was looking at stats of most fumbles, and it's like quarterback. Chris Carson, quarterback. There's not another running back or wide receiver.
You fumble once in the Pats backfield, and you're never seen again. You just get
or
ghosted.
Jonas Gray.
Yeah. Oh my God. Shatters all these records and then never seen again.
Oh goodness. This was a fun request on TikTok. It says Texans offense as a whole, medical disaster waiting to happen.
So I mean, not the offense as a whole. Like Watson's definitely.
Watson's good, But I think they're
But
probably saying like they're probably receivers. David Johnson, Kiki Cootie, Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks. Those are probably
yeah,
all
yeah,
four of those
a lot of
guys.
yeah. There's a lot of Cooks truthers out there, and my friend and super successful fantasy account analyst pointed out that Cooks has had a bunch of concussions, and people seem to think that for some reason he's less injury prone than Fuller, and for some reason that he might do better than Fuller, even though he hasn't been getting wide receiver one targets
Mm-mm.
for the past like 3 seasons.
Since
So
you're Drew Brees.
yeah, so I mean, I think the Texans offense outside of Watson's probably something to stay away from.
All right, that's that's what I was thinking. It is one
Yeah,
of
and
those
to be
offense
honest,
where it just
I'm not a super high taker for quarterbacks anyway. So even Watson's probably out for
you're
me.
just staying away from the Texans.
Yeah, I mean, unless you want to get Duke Johnson, he did have a really good. I'm not gonna hate too much on Duke Johnson. He did like throw it down for that one season with the Browns,
Oh
but I think he was
man,
injured for most of last season.
Duke Johnson. This one you mentioned you're a Steelers fan, so this is gonna be fun. Big Ben, are you staying
Yeah,
away?
yeah, I am, and I got a lot of hate about that as well too. uh, I mean, Big Ben, he's a well, I don't know. I'm gonna say he's a caveman because
I see his
he
beard.
is yeah, he is hard to take down. I can just imagine him walking around with like a huge club and just like that's how he plays football. He played through broken ribs. He's an animal. Like he's he's won 2 Super Bowls. He also had an elbow injury that required surgery, and he has had a lot of time to rest it, but he's obviously had a very atypical offseason where
Mm-hmm.
he hasn't been able to integrate throwing as easily as he probably would have in other off seasons. I don't think that they have wide receiver one. I got a lot of hate about that because first of all, some people are juju truthers. I'm not a juju truther
You're
unless
not
he's
a
a wide
Juju
receiver
truther.
two. No. Unless he's a wide receiver two. If he's wide receiver two, I think he can win your league.
All right,
But
yeah, I would agree with that. Not a wide receiver one.
he and even though like people say that he didn't have Ben throwing to him last season, but even the year before when he was playing wide receiver one, when AB wasn't playing in the games for some reason, he did not put up good numbers, and
He
that was
didn't.
with Ben throwing him. Ben, who's the wide receiver whisperer, he like makes greatness out of nothing. Juju has never performed well at the wide receiver one, and he's also been injured a bunch. So I'm
And
not
people
really
people
Juju's fan.
people act like Big Ben throwing to him in what was it 2 years ago, and last year Big Ben not throwing. That was the only difference in the offense, and they're kind of forgetting
Yeah,
that offense as a whole, the offensive line was much worse. James Conner was injured and much worse. No Antonio
yeah,
Brown, no Le'Veon Bell. That team, I mean, offensively, it's a nightmare offensively. Which 2018, it was one of the best offenses we've seen in a
yeah.
long time.
I mean,
So yeah,
Pouncey's
I'm.
on a downturn. He was at one time I would
Mhm.
arguably the best center in the NFL. He's still there. I don't think he's the best center anymore,
No,
unfortunately.
yeah.
But
All right, so we're gonna get to some closing remarks. This isn't exactly even medical; it's just your opinions. What are
okay,
players that are on your bust list that you just know they're busting? You're avoiding them. Doesn't really matter their ADP. You're just staying away.
I'm gonna stay away from Sony Michelle again, just because
That's an
he's
easy answer.
yeah, it's kind of a cop out. I agree, but I mean, yeah, I don't like Sony Michelle. I don't like so I like. I already said how I don't like Big Ben.
Hmm.
I don't like Juju. I don't like James Conner.
The Steelers
Still
and
like the
Sony
terrible
Michelle.
towel. I don't like most of the Lions. The only player in the Lions offense I would go for is Galladay. Probably Hawkinson. I think Hawkinson's pretty good value. He did have that concussion, but like I said before, one concussion, not a big deal. And I think that he's got some pretty great upside as well too.
I agree with that.
Who else? Yeah, I mean, I don't know who's on your bus list.
I mean, James Conner, Big Ben,
Yeah.
basically the Steelers.
Yeah, let's see here.
I
Like, yeah,
can't.
we already talked about the Seattle backfield. Stay away from them. Dolphins. Who they put in as their quarterback again?
Is it Fitzpatrick
Are they
still?
are they rolling with Fitz?
I
I know they
think they
drafted.
are.
Are they okay? Yeah, I mean, I probably would stay away from that. I mean, I know some people hit gold with Devontae Parker later on in the
Mm-hmm.
year, but
Yeah,
maybe he's a sleeper candidate if he's going late enough.
yeah. I think his ADP's a little higher though because last year he
Yeah, I mean,
broke out.
there's been Parker truthers for the past 5 years. It's like since like before he got in the league.
So you're staying away from the Steelers and the
The
Seahawks
Lions,
backfield
my
and the
two teams,
Lions. Your two teams. All right.
and the Skins too. I would
And
probably stay
and
away from the Skins.
okay, yeah, that's a good answer every
Yeah.
year. All right.
The wide receiver core for the Skins seems like it might be doing something or
I
whatever
like
they're going to call
McLaurin.
them.
I like McLaurin a lot. I
Yeah,
think he'll be good.
yeah.
All right. Who is the next Austin Hooper, that breakout tight end, or Darren Waller, the next breakout tight end? Maybe in his third season. A lot of people flying under the radar, but he just absolutely breaks out. Who is it this year?
I would actually say either that Seahawks tight end that got like
Disley?
clocked in a bar, yeah, or
Yeah.
was that Disley? No, that's someone else.
The guy who's named after a clothing brand.
I
What's his name?
I put the video of him getting clocked
Hollister.
out on Instagram,
Hollister.
by the way.
Hollister.
If you're trying to see some like World Star stuff, that's the one video on my Instagram
Is
that
it
probably
Hollister?
qualifies.
Right?
Yeah, no, Dallas Goder.
Dallas Goder. Okay, Goder. He's
So
Eagles.
we're talking
Eagles.
about like a sleeper tight end. Oh yeah, sorry, Eagles, not Seahawks. I knew it was a bird. No, but if we're talking about like some sleeper tight end that just pops out of nowhere, then I'd say Dallas Goder. But I'd say Hawkinson for someone who's like relatively well known and already has somewhat high expectations, but hasn't
I
really
like
met them.
Hawkinson. I just drafted him
Yeah.
in one league. I think he has a chance, but I like staying with a bird. Last year it was the Falcons. This year it's the Eagles
Yeah.
tight end. Makes sense. Makes sense. All right. Who's this year's Chris Godwin? Later round wide receiver that just absolutely explodes, wins you your championship.
Oh man.
And you can't say Calvin Ridley.
Oh wait, yeah, actually, shoot, not it's not Judy, but it is one of these bands.
Henry Ruggs, is it a rookie?
Yeah, it's a rookie.
Is it Denzel Mims?
No, it was one of the top three.
CD Lamb?
Yeah, CeeDee Lamb.
CD Lamb, you
That
like CD Lamb?
or wait, no, he's in the Cowboys offense, right?
Jalen Rager,
Yeah.
Brandon Ayuk.
No. It's either Judy, Lamb, or Ruggs. But I'm like drawing a huge blank on it. Whose team is Judy on right now?
Judy's on the Broncos. Ruggs went to Oakland. Lamb's on Cowboys.
Okay. Yeah, I like Judy.
Judy, you think
Yeah,
he's
'cause
this year's guy?
Yeah, I don't think there's really competition for touches in the Denver wide receiver core.
Yeah,
Whereas I mean the Cowboys are stacked.
Cowboys
with,
is stacked. Yeah, Broncos. He's just got to compete with Sutton, and Sutton hasn't been amazing or as amazing as we
yeah.
thought he would be.
And I think that there's definitely enough room for both of them. Like we also said how,
Yeah.
the running back game, they just have one running back who's likely going to be their viable back outside of like we talked about the Lindsey Freeman. And yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely enough room for there to be two viable wide receivers in that Denver offense.
Definitely. I like that. I just drafted him in the league. You're making my day right now. Who's the next breakout running back? Second to last question. Who's that guy who breaks out all over the place? There wasn't really one last. Dalvin Cook was last year.
Yeah. I think he's going to be a
years ago.
rookie again this year.
Another rookie.
Yeah. Just in the Chiefs offense. He's
Clyde
got the weird name.
Edwards-Helaire.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
You're
And
all
then
in
I
on
honestly
Hilaire.
I think Swift might have a shot just because, if Carrion goes down, it's not really anyone else there.
It's his
So,
offense. There's
yeah,
Galladay and
Swift
Swift.
is super talented. Swift is like a crazy talented running back.
Yeah, he was
And
great
he
in
can
Georgia.
great at catching as well too. Georgia backs are honestly they do well in the league. So
Todd Gurley. Yeah, they do. I like that because I also drafted him in the league.
yeah. Oh, you
So
man.
this, well, I liked him because Kerryon Johnson is there, and at first it looks, oh, I'm staying away, but you realize Kerryon Johnson is not playing this whole season.
Yeah.
And I mean,
He's
they may have to be a run-heavy team if Stafford gets hurt too.
Yeah, and Patricia is on the hot seat. Like he's been
Oh,
set. He's been told straight up he's on the hot seat. So if Swift just shows his potential, then they're just gonna hand him the rock, and they're just gonna be like,
yeah.
"All right, carry on." Like, sorry, man.
All right. Here is the second to last question. This is the last question. Who is your most owned fantasy player in 2020 going to be? Who's that player that you leave your draft and you have them? You cannot pass up on them. Who's that player going to be? Your fantasy MVP.
I might have to go with Dalvin again, just because
Delvin again.
people are shooting him down a lot. I think he's going to drop outside of that first half of the first round, just
Mhm.
because of kind of a lot of the hate he's getting and the way that he ended last season. And I think he's going to be a decent value pick in that later part of the first round.
People are going to be so mad when they pass on Dalvin Cook 2 years in a row.
Again, I think he was either close to or like top 5 overall points.
Yeah, and they're going to pass on him again because he, you can't pass on that talent in that situation, I don't think.
Yeah, you just have such a rock solid handcuff, regardless of the fact that it didn't work out last season. It's just like you have a linear path on where the touches go if he gets injured.
Yeah,
all these other backfields, you really don't have any idea where those touches are going if that guy goes down.
Yeah, it is nice he has a clear backup who's a good backup. Alexander Madison, you handcuff him and he will be good. Before you go, this isn't an injury question. I just was actually thinking about this just now. Is this year going to be the year of the handcuffs? If a player gets COVID, are they going to have to sit out a week and we're going to have to start Tony Pollard and Raquel Armstead?
So many Tony Pollard truthers last season. I remember that. This is definitely a year of the handcuff, and especially so just because each season they're going more towards running back by committees. So these workhorse running backs are becoming more and more rare. I remember like 2 seasons ago, they were kind of plentiful and people were steering more towards even taking a wide receiver in the first round.
Yeah, zero RB was popular.
Yeah, that's just not possible. I remember AB was going number 1 overall most of those, like for like a 2-year stretch. And
AB Julio, yeah. Goodness, times fly. Can you give any analysis on Antonio Brown? Or I don't think like mental stuff is your.
Yeah, AB. I mean, I did primary care, so I did a good amount of stuff there. I just think he's a passionate guy who hasn't really been reined in most of his life.
Okay.
He's uber talented, uber passionate, and I think somewhat paranoid as well too. And hopefully he gets stuff sorted out because it's always fun watching him on the field.
Oh yeah, one of the best, but he's had a rough couple of years.
Yeah.
All righty, so you're not worried about the feet being frozen, even if he comes back.
Man, I remember when that was the biggest concern about him.
That was like a year ago today.
A 1 week period.
Antonio Brown freezes off. Then he brought his own custom painted helmet, and then things somehow got worse.
Though. The memes were so good for Antonio Brown.
Oh, alrighty. So I will let you go. It was great sitting down talking injuries. Definitely shed some light on a lot of these players. I think the followers are gonna love this because everyone needs to know about these injuries, and there aren't good ways to find out about these injuries. You can't just like get a medical degree by going on Google for a couple minutes.
I mean, some people do, but
okay, yeah, I know those people. But thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. I try and throw up a post. Right now, I'm throwing up maybe like 1 or 2 posts a week. When the season kicks in, obviously, I do a lot more. As soon as the player injuries drop, I try and get a post out right away. But yeah, I mean, I'm still putting out injuries that are just relevant. You can always DM me as well, too, if you have specific questions about injuries. I don't treat specific people's injuries because I can't do that due to malpractice. And so that's just something to throw out there. Sometimes people ask me if I can diagnose them. And I can't do that
really?
Yeah. But yeah, other than that, if you have any injury questions, you can always hit me up just about players and stuff.
It's always great seeing you post because I'm always worried the season's going to get canceled. Then I see you post. I'm like, okay, if he thinks it's going to happen, it's going to.
Yeah, I think it's going to get pushed, and I think it's going to be abbreviated. But unlike college sports, where they have to take into account that they're students and they can't really put them through risks that are different than other students. These
Yeah,
are paid professionals, and I think that they'll find some way to get some sort of season going this year.
they'll find a way. Goodell wants his money.
Yeah, yeah.
So one thing we
Man, the
know
first
for
time that
sure.
Goodell has not gotten booed at an NFL draft because it was on video.
That was weird. That was a weird thing that happened, that online draft. It's gonna be a
Yeah,
weird
I remember
season. It's
that
gonna be a
one.
fun season.
Yeah, yeah. I remember Cliff Kingsbury's house was sick though.
Oh,
I just remember seeing that one shot and I was like, dude, this guy is crushing it.
it's like a huge mansion. And then they showed Bill Belichick. He's like in his like normal small kitchen with his dogs. Oh goodness.
Different priorities.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I'll let you go. I know you're a very, very busy person. But thank you once again. I hope we can talk or collab in the future as we get closer to the season. It's
Yeah,
always a lot of
definitely.
fun.
Man,
I'll
we can always
definitely try.
collab. I remember you were the one that actually got me my first logo, so that was I
Oh
still use
yeah, that
that.
little fantasy with a stethoscope. I don't even
Yeah.
know if you use a stethoscope in
Yeah,
your
I
field.
actually don't use a stethoscope really. That's kind of the knock on sports medicine is that we do a lot of non-stethoscope like things, but it's a cool logo.
I mean, it looks good. All right, well, thank you. I gotta go. I'll see you next time. Have a great day. Have a great week, and stay healthy.
Yeah, great time, Calvin. Thanks again.
Thank you.